Chapter 1. The affair begins. Jessica woke up slowly, stretching her limbs luxuriously under the soft sheets. She felt a strong, warm arm wrapped around her waist and smiled, remembering where she was. The body next to hers was familiar and comforting, and she nestled into the embrace, savoring the moment. Robert, her lover, stirred slightly, his hand moving gently against her skin. They lay like that, wrapped in each other's arms, until the alarm clock buzzed. Reluctantly, Robert got up and went into the adjoining room to get ready for work. They always booked rooms next to each other to avoid any suspicion about their affair. Jessica watched him go, a mixture of contentment and guilt washing over her. She had been seeing Robert for over a year now, and their relationship had become a necessary escape from her crumbling marriage. Jessica was married to Thomas, who worked from home as an IT consultant. Their marriage had been on shaky ground for years, strained by the early challenges they faced together. They had their first child, Ava, when Jessica was just 16. The pregnancy had been a shock to both their families. Her parents were furious, forcing her to have an abortion, while Thomas's parents wanted them to keep the baby and offered to help raise the child. Despite the turmoil, Thomas had stood by Jessica throughout her pregnancy. He defended her from the harsh judgments of others, even getting suspended from school for fighting her bullies. Their daughter, Ava, was born just 2 days after Jessica's 16th birthday. Holding their baby girl, they both knew they couldn't give her up. Jessica's parents disowned her, and they moved in with Thomas's parents, who helped them raise Ava while they finished high school. After graduation, Jessica and Thomas got married simply and moved into a tiny house. Their plans to attend university were postponed when they had another daughter, Mia. Over the next decade, they worked hard, raising their daughters with the support of their parents. Jessica became an assistant to Robert, the director of business development for a medical device company. She was 29, and Robert was 38. They quickly became a strong professional team, and Jessica loved her job. Her work required frequent travel, often with Robert. They spent a lot of time together, getting to know each other well. Robert was married too, with 3 young children. To keep Thomas from worrying, Jessica lied about her travel companions, often saying she was traveling alone or with another woman. In reality, she relished the time spent with Robert. They shared cozy dinners and long conversations, which slowly turned into something more. 6 months into her job, after landing a big sales order, they celebrated with a special dinner and expensive French champagne. Feeling tipsy and happy, Robert placed his hand on Jessica's and confessed, "Jessica, I am falling in love with you." Her heart raced, and she felt speechless. He stood up, extended his hand to her, and after a moment of hesitation, she took it. He led her to his hotel room, and that night, they made love for the first time. The next morning, Jessica was filled with a mixture of guilt and exhilaration. They had breakfast in bed, making love again before leaving for the airport. On the flight home, Jessica rationalized her actions. She had never had the chance to be with other men when she was younger, and she felt she deserved this experience. She also thought it might teach Thomas a lesson for neglecting her, as their intimate life had suffered since the early years of their marriage. Yet as soon as she arrived home, the guilt resurfaced. Thomas was happy to see her, but she avoided his affection, claiming she was tired. Their affair continued, with Jessica and Robert managing their time together carefully. They communicated through secret email accounts and arranged mock business trips to nearby hotels. At work events, they maintained a professional facade, never drawing attention to their relationship. Thomas, meanwhile, was growing increasingly frustrated with Jessica's frequent absences and emotional distance. Thomas had supported Jessica's career initially, but her long hours and frequent travel took a toll on their family. He managed most of the parenting duties, balancing his work with raising Ava and Mia. Thomas noticed Jessica's change in behavior, becoming distant and irritable. Their intimate life dwindled to rare encounters, and any attempt to discuss their issues was met with dismissive responses from Jessica. At a staff Christmas party, Thomas met Robert and his wife for the first time. The interaction was brief, but left Thomas uneasy. Robert seemed friendly and reserved, not the ogre Jessica had described. The following year, Thomas started his own IT consulting company, focusing on raising their daughters with little help from Jessica. Despite his suspicions, he found no incriminating evidence and continued to support his family as best he could. Jessica's affair with Robert became her escape from the monotony and frustration of her daily life. She was deeply in love with him, often joking about leaving their spouses to be together. However, they both knew the serious consequences such a decision would entail, especially for their children. As their company's business expanded, their trips became more frequent, providing them with ample opportunities to be together. Jessica's thoughts were constantly occupied with Robert, causing her to become emotionally distant from Thomas and their daughters. She managed her guilt, lying becoming second nature. Jessica's love for Robert grew stronger, and sometimes she considered leaving Thomas for him. Yet she knew it would be a big step with serious repercussions. Jessica's career flourished, but at the cost of her family. She was traveling 3 weeks out of every 4, sometimes not coming home until late Saturday evening. When she was home, she either worked or watched TV. Sundays were spent sleeping in, shopping, or avoiding family time. The girls and Thomas often took vacations without her, and he grew closer to Emily, a single mother he had met through their daughter's soccer games. Emily was a charming, tall, beautiful woman who had recently moved to the city for a new job. She had 2 children, Chloe and Lucas. Emily's presence became a comforting constant in Thomas's life, and they quickly became good friends. They supported each other in raising their children, and their friendship began to grow into something more. Jessica, oblivious to the changes in Thomas's life, continued her affair with Robert. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays in secret, using work conferences as excuses. At home, Jessica complained about her demanding boss and frequent travel, dismissing Thomas's concerns. Their relationship deteriorated further, with Jessica showing little love or affection towards Thomas or their daughters. Thomas, meanwhile, was planning his next move. He knew their marriage was over and was determined to protect his daughters and his business. He started gathering evidence of Jessica's affair, planning to use it at the right moment. Despite his growing feelings for Emily, he remained focused on his daughter's well-being. As the months passed, the distance between Jessica and Thomas grew. She was wrapped up in her world with Robert, while Thomas found solace in his friendship with Emily. The stage was set for the eventual confrontation, with both Jessica and Thomas heading towards an inevitable showdown that would change their lives forever. Chapter 2. Suspicion arises. Thomas sat at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. The house was quiet, Ava and Mia were still at school, and Jessica was on yet another business trip. He stared at the screen, trying to focus on his work, but his mind kept drifting to the growing distance between him and his wife. It wasn't just the physical distance caused by her frequent travel, it was the emotional chasm that had developed over the years. He glanced at the clock. Ava's soccer practice would be ending soon, and he needed to pick her up. Thomas closed his laptop and grabbed his keys. As he drove to the soccer field, his thoughts wandered back to the past few months. Jessica had become increasingly distant, and their conversations were often strained. She was always tired or too busy to engage with the family. Thomas arrived at the soccer field just as the practice was wrapping up. He watched as Ava and her teammates gathered their things. He waved to her, and she ran over, her face lighting up with a smile. "Hey, Dad," Ava said, her cheeks flushed from the exertion. "Can Chloe come over for dinner tonight?" Thomas smiled. Chloe was Emily's daughter, and she and Ava had become fast friends. Of course, if it's okay with her mom. Ava grinned and ran back to Chloe, who nodded enthusiastically. Thomas waved to Emily, who was chatting with some of the other parents. She made her way over, her son Lucas trailing behind her. "Hey, Thomas," Emily said, smiling warmly. Ava asked if Chloe could come over for dinner. "Sure, we'd love to have her," Thomas replied. "Why don't you and Lucas join us as well?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "That sounds great. Thanks for the invitation." They all headed to their cars, and Thomas couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Spending time with Emily and her kids had become a bright spot in his increasingly lonely life. He valued her friendship and the way she understood his struggles. Dinner that evening was lively, with the kids chattering about school and soccer. Thomas and Emily sat back, enjoying the company and the sense of normalcy it brought. As they cleaned up after dinner, Emily noticed Thomas's distant look. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Thomas sighed, leaning against the counter. "I don't know, Emily. Things with Jessica have been difficult. She has always gone, and when she is here, it's like she is somewhere else entirely." Emily nodded, her expression sympathetic. "Have you tried talking to her about it?" "Yeah, but it doesn't seem to make a difference. She brushes me off or says she is just tired from work," Thomas replied, frustration evident in his voice. Emily placed a hand on his arm. "I am sorry, Thomas. I know how hard it can be when someone you care about becomes distant." Thomas looked at her, grateful for her understanding. "Thanks, Emily. I just don't know what to do anymore." They continued talking, sharing their worries and finding comfort in each other's company. Emily's empathy and support meant the world to Thomas, and he couldn't imagine navigating this difficult time without her. The next morning, as Thomas dropped the kids off at school, his mind was still preoccupied with his troubled marriage. He decided to take a walk along the beach to clear his head. The sound of the waves and the fresh sea breeze helped, but the nagging suspicion about Jessica's behavior remained. Later that day, Thomas found himself checking Jessica's social media accounts and emails, looking for any signs of infidelity. He felt guilty for invading her privacy, but his instincts told him something was off. He found nothing conclusive, just the usual work-related messages and updates. That evening, after the kids were in bed, Thomas sat alone in the living room, replaying the past few months in his mind. He recalled the Christmas party where he had first met Robert. Jessica had introduced them, but the brief exchange had left him uneasy. Robert seemed too friendly, too polished, and Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their relationship than Jessica had let on. As the days passed, Thomas became more vigilant. He started paying closer attention to Jessica's behavior, noting the times she seemed distracted or preoccupied. He also noticed the little things like how she always seemed to be texting someone, or how she would sometimes smile at her phone and then quickly hide it when he approached. One evening while Jessica was out of town, Thomas received a call from Ava. She sounded upset. "Dad, I tried calling Mom, but she didn't answer," Ava said, her voice shaky. "She promised she'd help me with my homework tonight." Thomas's heart ached for his daughter. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I'm sure she's just busy with work. Why don't you come downstairs and I'll help you?" Ava agreed, and they spent the next hour working through her homework together. Thomas tried to make it fun, but he couldn't help but feel a growing resentment towards Jessica for her absence. After Ava went to bed, Thomas sat at the kitchen table, his mind racing. He needed to know the truth about Jessica's relationship with Robert. The uncertainty was eating away at him, and he couldn't continue living in this limbo. The next morning, Thomas decided to confide in Emily. They met for coffee at a quiet cafe near the beach. He hesitated for a moment before speaking, unsure of how to begin. "Emily, I need to talk to you about something," Thomas said, his voice low. "I think Jessica might be having an affair." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, Thomas, I'm so sorry. What makes you think that?" Thomas explained the changes in Jessica's behavior, the frequent trips, and his growing suspicions about her relationship with Robert. Emily listened attentively, her expression filled with concern. "I don't have any concrete proof," Thomas admitted, "but I can shake the feeling that something isn't right." Emily reached across the table and took his hand. "Thomas, I know this is incredibly difficult, but you need to trust your instincts. If you think something is going on, it's worth investigating further." Thomas nodded, feeling a sense of determination. "You are right. I need to know the truth, for my sake and for the girls." As they finished their coffee, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would find out the truth about Jessica and Robert, no matter how painful it might be. With Emily's support, he knew he had the strength to face whatever came next. That evening, Thomas decided to confront Jessica when she returned from her trip. He rehearsed what he would say, preparing himself for the difficult conversation ahead. As he waited for her to come home, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of dread and anticipation. When Jessica finally walked through the door, she looked tired but cheerful. Thomas took a deep breath and approached her. "Jessica, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. She looked at him, surprised by his serious tone. "What is going on, Thomas?" "I've been noticing some changes in your behavior lately," he began, choosing his words carefully. "You're always tired, distracted, and distant. I can't help but feel like there's something you're not telling me." Jessica's expression shifted from surprise to defensiveness. "Thomas, I'm just busy with work. You know how demanding my job is. I understand that. But it feels like more than just work," Thomas replied, trying to stay calm. "I need to know if there's something going on between you and Robert." Jessica's face went pale and she took a step back. "How dare you accuse me of that? Robert is just my boss, nothing more." Thomas felt a surge of frustration. "I want to believe you, Jessica, but your behavior says otherwise. If there's nothing going on, why do you seem so secretive?" Jessica crossed her arms, her eyes blazing with anger. "I can believe you are doing this, Thomas. I've been working my ass off to support this family, and this is how you repay me?" Thomas's resolve wavered, but he pressed on. "I'm not accusing you, Jessica. I just need to understand what's happening. Our marriage is falling apart, and I don't know why." Jessica turned away, her shoulders tense. "Maybe it's because you're always looking for something wrong. Maybe you are the problem, Thomas." Thomas felt a pang of hurt at her words, but he didn't back down. "If that's true, then let us work on it together. But we can fix anything if we're not honest with each other." Jessica remained silent, and Thomas knew he wouldn't get any answers tonight. He watched as she walked upstairs, feeling a heavy weight settle in his chest. The confrontation hadn't gone as he'd hoped, but it had made one thing clear: their marriage was in serious trouble, and the path to healing would be long and difficult. As the days passed, Thomas continued to observe Jessica's behavior, growing more certain that his suspicions were justified. He began to gather evidence, knowing that the truth would come out eventually. With Emily's support, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead, determined to protect his daughters and find a way forward, no matter how painful the journey might be. Chapter 3. Caught in the Act. Thomas felt a heavy sense of dread as he arrived at the annual company Christmas party. Jessica had insisted he come, and though he didn't want to, he felt it was necessary. He needed to see her interactions with Robert firsthand. The party was held at a luxurious mansion owned by the company's CEO, and the holiday decorations and festive atmosphere did little to lift his spirits. As he walked in, he was greeted by a few of Jessica's colleagues, but he barely registered their pleasantries. His eyes scanned the room for her, and he found her chatting with Robert near the grand piano. She laughed at something he said, her hand lightly touching his arm. Thomas felt a pang of jealousy and anger. "Thomas, you made it!" Jessica called out, waving him over. She looked beautiful in her red dress, but he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that gnawed at him. "Yeah, I wouldn't miss it," he replied, forcing a smile. He approached them, trying to keep his emotions in check. "Robert, this is my husband, Thomas," Jessica said, introducing them. "Thomas, this is Robert, my boss." Robert extended his hand, his smile seemingly genuine. "Nice to meet you, Thomas. Jessica speaks very highly of you." "Nice to meet you too, Robert," Thomas said, shaking his hand firmly. He couldn't help but notice the way Robert's eyes lingered on Jessica, and it made his blood boil. They exchanged polite conversation for a few minutes before Jessica was pulled away by one of her co-workers. Robert excused himself to get a drink, leaving Thomas standing alone. He felt a surge of frustration and decided to take a walk around the house to clear his head. As he wandered through the rooms, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house was filled with laughter and holiday cheer, but all Thomas could think about was Jessica's betrayal. He reached the top of the stairs and found himself in a quiet hallway. It was a welcome respite from the noise downstairs. As he walked down the hallway, He heard a faint sound coming from one of the rooms. Curious, he approached the door and listened. His heart nearly stopped when he heard Jessica's voice. "Merry Christmas, my dear," she said softly. "Merry Christmas, my love," Robert's voice replied. Thomas's hands trembled as he pushed the door open slightly, peering inside. His worst fears were confirmed. Jessica and Robert were locked in a passionate embrace, kissing deeply. He quickly retreated, closing the door quietly. His mind raced, and he felt a mix of anger, hurt, and betrayal. Instead of confronting them immediately, Thomas decided to bide his time. He needed to think clearly and plan his next steps. He made his way back downstairs, trying to compose himself. Jessica rejoined him a few minutes later, looking slightly flushed but smiling as if nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing his tense expression. "Yeah, just needed some air," Thomas replied, forcing a smile. "Let's enjoy the party." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Thomas played the role of the dutiful husband, but inside he was seething. He knew he needed to gather more evidence and plan his exit carefully. Confronting Jessica at the party would only cause a scene and make things more difficult. That night, after they returned home, Thomas waited until Jessica was asleep. He quietly got out of bed and went to his office. He knew he needed proof of Jessica's affair, something undeniable that would protect him in the impending divorce. He accessed her laptop, knowing her password, and began searching through her emails and messages. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. There were countless emails and messages between Jessica and Robert, detailing their affair and making plans to be together. He found photos and videos that confirmed his suspicions. As he read through the messages, his anger grew. They had been together for over a year, and their conversations were filled with declarations of love and plans for the future. Thomas took screenshots and saved copies of everything, knowing he would need them later. He felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that he finally had the proof he needed, and sadness that his marriage had come to this. He loved Jessica once, but now all he felt was betrayal. Over the next few days, Thomas continued to gather evidence, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy. He confided in Emily, who was supportive and offered to help in any way she could. Thomas knew he couldn't do this alone, and having Emily by his side gave him the strength he needed. One evening, as they sat in Emily's living room, Thomas shared his plan. "I am going to confront her, but not until I have everything in place. I need to protect Ava and Mia, and I need to make sure she can take anything from me." Emily nodded, her expression serious. "I understand. Just know that I am here for you, whatever you need." Thomas reached over and squeezed her hand. "Thank you, Emily. I don't know what I'd do without you." A few weeks later, everything was ready. Thomas had consulted a lawyer, who advised him on how to proceed with the divorce and custody arrangements. He had also moved most of his important documents and valuables to a secure location. He knew the confrontation would be ugly, but he was prepared. Jessica returned from another business trip, looking exhausted. Thomas waited until the girls were in bed before asking her to sit down in the living room. "Jessica, we need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. She looked at him warily. "What is it, Thomas?" "I know about you and Robert," he said, watching her reaction carefully. Jessica's eyes widened in shock, and she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Thomas continued, "I've seen the emails, the messages, the photos. I know everything." Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes, and she shook her head. "Thomas, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "It doesn't matter what you meant," Thomas replied, his voice hardening. "You betrayed me, and you betrayed our family. I'm filing for divorce, and I am taking Ava and Mia with me." Jessica's face crumpled, and she began to sob. "Please, Thomas, don't do this. We can work things out. I'll end it with Robert. I'll do anything." Thomas felt a pang of sadness, but he knew there was no going back. "It's too late, Jessica. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." He stood up, looking down at her one last time. "I'll be staying with a friend for a few days. I'll come back to discuss the details once you've had time to process this." With that, he turned and walked out of the house, leaving Jessica sobbing on the couch. He got into his car and drove to Emily's house, where she was waiting for him. As he walked in, she wrapped her arms around him, offering comfort and support. Thomas knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he felt a sense of relief. The truth was out, and he could finally start to rebuild his life. With Emily by his side, he knew he had the strength to face whatever challenges came his way. Chapter 4: A New Alliance. Thomas woke up in Emily's guest bedroom, the early morning sunlight streaming through the curtains. He felt a moment of disorientation before the events of the previous night came rushing back. Jessica's tear-streaked face, her desperate apologies, and his own sense of resolve. He had taken the first step towards reclaiming his life, but there was still a long road ahead. He got dressed and made his way downstairs, where Emily was already up, preparing breakfast. She looked up and smiled as he entered the kitchen. "Good morning, Thomas. How did you sleep?" she asked, her voice warm and soothing. "Morning, Emily. I slept better than I expected, considering everything," Thomas replied, grateful for her presence. "Thank you for letting me stay here. You are always welcome here, Thomas. You know that?" Emily said, setting a plate of pancakes on the table. "I thought you might need a good breakfast to start the day." As they ate, Thomas shared his plans with Emily. He needed to secure his finances, protect his daughters, and finalize the divorce. Emily listened intently, offering her support and advice. She had been through a difficult separation herself and knew the challenges that lay ahead. After breakfast, Thomas called his lawyer to set up a meeting. He needed to discuss the next steps and ensure everything was in place to protect his assets and secure custody of Ava and Mia. Emily offered to accompany him, and he gratefully accepted. Her presence was a source of strength and comfort. Later that morning, they met with the lawyer, Rebecca. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had a reputation for being a fierce advocate for her clients. As they sat in her office, Thomas laid out the evidence he had gathered and explained his situation. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. "You've done a thorough job, Thomas. This evidence will be crucial in securing custody and protecting your assets. I'll start filing the necessary paperwork today." "What about the house?" Thomas asked, his concern evident. "I want to make sure Jessica can take it from me." "We'll address that in the divorce settlement," Rebecca replied. "Given the circumstances, you have a strong case for keeping the house. However, I recommend you move out temporarily until the legal separation is finalized. It will show the court that you are serious about ending the marriage." Thomas agreed, knowing it was the best course of action. As they left the lawyer's office, he felt a sense of determination. He was taking control of his life, and with Emily's support, he knew he could navigate the difficult times ahead. In the following days, Thomas focused on preparing for the transition. He moved his belongings into Emily's house, making sure to keep everything organized and secure. He also talked to Ava and Mia, explaining the situation in a way they could understand. "Girls, your mother and I are going through a difficult time right now," Thomas said gently, holding their hands. "We've decided it is best for us to live apart for a while. You'll be staying with me at Emily's house." Ava looked worried, her eyes wide. "Are you and Mom getting a divorce?" Thomas nodded, his heart aching. "Yes, sweetheart. But I want you to know that both your mom and I love you very much. This doesn't change that." Mia, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. "Will we still see Mom?" "Of course," Thomas assured her. "You will still spend time with your mom. We'll work out a schedule that works for everyone." The girls seemed to accept his explanation, though Thomas knew it would take time for them to adjust. He made a mental note to arrange counseling for them, wanting to ensure they had the support they needed during this transition. One evening, as Thomas and Emily sat in the living room, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of gratitude for her. She had been his rock through all of this, offering unwavering support and understanding. He reached over and took her hand. "Emily, I don't know how to thank you for everything you have done," Thomas said, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't think I could have gotten through this without you." Emily squeezed his hand, her eyes warm and kind. "Thomas, you don't need to thank me. I am just glad I can be here for you. We are in this together." Their bond deepened over the following weeks. as they navigated the challenges of their new reality. Thomas found solace in their growing relationship, and he began to see a future filled with hope and possibility. They spent time together as a family, creating new routines and traditions. Emily's children, Chloe and Lucas, blended seamlessly with Ava and Mia, and their house was filled with laughter and warmth. One Saturday afternoon, as they all gathered for a picnic at the park, Thomas watched the kids play, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. Emily sat beside him, her presence a comforting reminder that he wasn't alone in this journey. "Look at them," Thomas said, nodding towards the children. "They are so happy." Emily smiled, leaning against him. "They are. And they are resilient. They'll get through this, and so will we." Thomas nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for the life they were building together. Despite the pain and betrayal he had experienced, he knew he had found something precious in Emily. Their relationship was a source of strength, and it gave him the courage to face whatever challenges lay ahead. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Thomas felt a sense of contentment. The kids chatted animatedly about their day, and Emily's laughter filled the room. He realized that, despite everything, he had found a new sense of family and belonging. As the days turned into weeks, Thomas continued to work closely with Rebecca to finalize the divorce. He attended mediation sessions with Jessica, where they discussed the division of assets and custody arrangements. Jessica was cooperative, though their interactions remained strained and formal. One evening, after a particularly tense mediation session, Thomas returned to Emily's house, feeling emotionally drained. Emily greeted him with a hug, sensing his need for comfort. "How did it go?" she asked gently. "It was tough," Thomas admitted, sitting down on the couch. "But we're making progress. Rebecca thinks we'll have everything finalized soon." Emily sat beside him, her presence a balm to his weary soul. "You are doing great, Thomas. Just remember to take it one step at a time." Thomas nodded, grateful for her support. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Emily. You've been my anchor through all of this." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with affection. "And you've been mine, Thomas. We are in this together, remember?" As the weeks passed, Thomas and Emily's relationship continued to grow stronger. They supported each other through the challenges of blending their families and building a new life together. Thomas found himself falling more deeply in love with Emily, and he knew she felt the same. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Thomas took Emily's hand. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about the future. I know we're still figuring things out, but I can imagine my life without you." Emily looked at him, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thomas, I feel the same way. You and the girls have become such an important part of my life." Thomas smiled, feeling a sense of certainty. "I know we have a lot to work through, but I want us to do it together. I want us to build a future together." Emily leaned in and kissed him, her heart full. "I want that too, Thomas, more than anything." As they sat there, wrapped in each other's embrace, Thomas felt a sense of hope and possibility. Despite the pain and challenges they had faced, they had found something beautiful and enduring in each other. Together, they knew they could face whatever the future held, confident in the strength of their love and the family they were building. Chapter 5. The Big Move. Jessica sat in her office, the noise of the bustling city outside a stark contrast to the turmoil inside her mind. She stared at her computer screen, unable to focus. The confrontation with Thomas had shaken her more than she cared to admit. She had thought she could juggle her affair with Robert and her family life indefinitely, but now everything was unraveling. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Robert. "Can we meet for lunch? We need to talk." Jessica sighed and typed a quick reply, agreeing to meet him at their usual spot, a small cafe a few blocks away. She grabbed her coat and left the office, her mind racing with thoughts of the impending conversation. When she arrived at the cafe, Robert was already there, looking just as troubled as she felt. He stood up as she approached, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. "Jessica, we need to talk about what's next," Robert said, his tone serious. Your husband knows about us, and things are getting complicated. Jessica nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety in her stomach. I know, Robert. Thomas confronted me, and he has filed for divorce. He has taken the girls with him. Robert looked pained. I am so sorry, Jessica. This is a mess. We need to figure out how to move forward. They talked through their options, but Jessica knew that any decision they made would have serious consequences. She felt torn between her love for Robert and her responsibilities to her family. The guilt weighed heavily on her, and she struggled to see a clear path ahead. Back at home, Thomas was busy making preparations for the move. He had found a rental house nearby and had started packing up their belongings. The girls were helping, though they were clearly upset by the sudden changes. Dad, why do we have to move? Ava asked, her eyes filled with worry. Thomas knelt down beside her, taking her hand. Sweetheart, sometimes things change and we have to adapt. This move is going to be good for us. It is a fresh start. Mia looked up from packing a box of her toys. Will we still see Mom? Yes, you will, Thomas assured her. We're going to work out a schedule so you can spend time with both of us. It's going to be different, but we'll get through it together. The girls nodded, though they still looked uncertain. Thomas felt a pang of guilt, but he knew this was the right decision. He needed to protect them and provide a stable environment. A few days later, the moving truck arrived, and the house was filled with the chaotic energy of packing and organizing. Emily was there to help, her presence a comforting constant. She and Thomas worked seamlessly together, coordinating the move and ensuring everything went smoothly. As they loaded the last of the boxes into the truck, Jessica arrived home from work. She watched the scene from the driveway, a mix of emotions playing across her face. She approached Thomas, who was directing the movers. Thomas, can we talk? She asked quietly. Thomas nodded and led her inside, away from the bustling activity. They sat down in the empty living room, the echoes of their past life surrounding them. Jessica, we need to finalize the details of the divorce and the custody arrangements, Thomas began, his tone firm but not unkind. I want to make sure this transition is as smooth as possible for the girls. Jessica nodded, her eyes downcast. I understand, Thomas. I never wanted it to come to this. Neither did I, Thomas replied, feeling a pang of sadness. But we need to focus on what's best for Ava and Mia. They discussed the logistics, agreeing on a shared custody arrangement that would allow the girls to spend time with both parents. Jessica would keep the house, while Thomas would move into the rental with Emily and her children. As they talked, Jessica couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. She had thought she could have it all, but now she was watching her family slip away. She knew she had made mistakes, but the reality of the consequences was hitting her hard. Later that evening, as the movers finished unloading the truck at the new house, Thomas took a moment to survey their new home. It was a modest but comfortable house with enough space for everyone. Emily had already started unpacking, making the house feel warm and inviting. Welcome home, Emily said, coming up behind him and wrapping her arms around his waist. Thomas smiled, feeling a sense of relief. Thanks, Emily. I couldn't have done this without you. We are in this together, remember? She replied, leaning in for a kiss. As the days turned into weeks, Thomas and Emily worked on settling into their new life. They established routines, blending their families and creating a sense of stability. The kids adapted well, and the house was soon filled with laughter and activity. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Thomas noticed how happy the girls seemed. Ava and Mia were chatting animatedly with Chloe and Lucas, their faces lit up with smiles. He felt a sense of peace knowing they were adjusting well to the changes. Thomas, this dinner is amazing, Emily said, breaking into his thoughts. You've really outdone yourself. Thomas grinned. Thanks, Emily. I'm glad everyone is enjoying it. After dinner, they all gathered in the living room for a movie night. The kids piled onto the couch with blankets and popcorn, while Thomas and Emily sat together, their hands intertwined. As the movie played, Thomas couldn't help but feel grateful for the new life they were building. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Thomas and Emily sat on the porch, enjoying the cool evening breeze. They talked about their hopes and dreams, planning for the future. "Thomas, I've been thinking," Emily said, her voice thoughtful. "Once everything settles down, maybe we could take a family trip. It would be good for all of us to spend some time together, away from everything." Thomas nodded, liking the idea. "That sounds perfect, Emily. We could all use a break." As they sat there, planning their future, Thomas felt a sense of optimism. Despite the challenges they had faced, they were moving forward, stronger and more united than ever. He knew there would be more hurdles ahead, but with Emily by his side, he felt ready to face anything. The next few months were filled with both challenges and triumphs. Thomas continued to work closely with Rebecca to finalize the divorce, attending court hearings and mediation sessions. Jessica was cooperative, though their interactions remained formal and distant. Throughout it all, Emily was his rock. She provided unwavering support and love, helping him navigate the complexities of the legal process and the emotional toll it took on him. Their relationship grew deeper, and Thomas found solace in their partnership. One day, as they were working in the garden, Thomas received a call from Rebecca. He stepped away to take the call, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety. "Thomas, I have good news," Rebecca said, her tone upbeat. "The divorce is finalized. You have full custody of Ava and Mia, and the financial settlement is in your favor. Jessica has agreed to the terms and everything is official." Thomas felt a surge of relief. "Thank you, Rebecca. I can tell you how much this means to me." "You've been through a lot, Thomas. You deserve this fresh start. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to call." As he hung up the phone, Thomas felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He walked back to Emily, who was waiting with a curious look. "What's the news?" she asked, wiping her hands on her gardening gloves. "The divorce is finalized," Thomas said, a smile spreading across his face. "It's over, Emily. We can finally move on." Emily's face lit up with joy. She wrapped her arms around him, and they shared a long, heartfelt embrace. "I am so happy for you, Thomas," Emily said, her voice filled with emotion. "This is the beginning of a new chapter for all of us." As they stood there holding each other, Thomas felt a sense of hope and possibility. They had faced many challenges, but they had come out stronger. With the divorce behind him and a future filled with love and promise, he knew they were ready to embrace whatever came next. Chapter 6. Volcano of Lies. Jessica stared at her plane ticket, a one-way flight to Bali, Indonesia. The upcoming sales conference was an important event for her career, but it was also a chance for her and Robert to escape the chaos of their lives for a while. They had planned this trip meticulously, each of them telling their families and colleagues they were spending the holidays with relatives to avoid suspicion. As Jessica packed her bags, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach. The fallout from Thomas's confrontation still lingered, and she knew their divorce was looming. Despite her attempts to mend things with her daughters Ava and Mia were distant, their trust shattered. She arrived at the airport, her nerves frayed. Robert would join her a day later to avoid raising any eyebrows. Jessica boarded the plane, trying to focus on the upcoming days in Bali, hoping they could rekindle some of the passion that had once defined their relationship. Meanwhile, back home, Thomas was executing his own plans. He knew Jessica's trip was not what it seemed. The surveillance software he had installed on her devices had given him a clear picture of her real destination and intentions. As soon as she left, he put his plan into motion. Thomas and Emily, along with their children, moved their belongings to the new house. The girls were a mix of excitement and uncertainty, but Emily's presence provided a sense of stability. Thomas had taken leave from work to ensure everything went smoothly and to finalize the details of his separation from Jessica. A week into Jessica's trip, an unexpected event threw a wrench into her plans. Mount Agung, an active volcano in Bali, erupted, spewing volcanic ash into the air and grounding all flights to and from the island. Jessica was stuck, and Robert, who hadn't yet left for Bali, was left behind in the U.S. Jessica's initial frustration turned to panic as the days passed, and the volcanic activity showed no signs of stopping. She was confined to her hotel room, unable to reach Robert or return home. Her attempts to contact Thomas were met with cold politeness. He expressed understanding for her extended business trip, but his tone was distant and detached. Thomas, on the other hand, found a dark satisfaction in Jessica's predicament. He monitored her frantic online searches for ways to return home and her desperate emails to Robert. The lovers' plan had backfired spectacularly, and Thomas couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Emily, sensing Thomas's internal conflict, tried to keep things light at home. She organized activities for the kids and made their new house feel like home. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Thomas confided in her. "I know it sounds terrible, but I can't help but feel a bit of satisfaction that she is stuck there," Thomas admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. Emily looked at him with understanding. "Thomas, it's natural to feel that way after everything she's put you through. It's a consequence of her actions. Just remember to focus on what's best for you and the girls." Thomas nodded, grateful for her support. "You are right, Emily. I just want to move on and make sure the girls are okay." Days turned into weeks, and Jessica's situation grew more desperate. She called home less frequently, knowing her lies were catching up with her. When she did call, Thomas would ask casual questions about the conference she was attending, each one designed to trip her up. She scrambled for answers, increasingly aware that he knew more than he was letting on. One evening, during one of their strained phone calls, Thomas casually mentioned, "Did you hear about those poor people stuck in Bali because of the volcano? Must be terrible." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Yes, I heard about it," Jessica stammered. "It's awful. Yeah, I heard from a colleague that the Grand Hyatt in Nusa Dua is one of the hotels affected. Have you ever been there?" Thomas's tone was deceptively light. Jessica's heart pounded. That was her exact hotel. "Oh, no, I haven't tea. Must be tough for them," she managed to reply. After hanging up, Jessica immediately moved to a cheaper hotel on the other side of the island, hoping to avoid further suspicion. She felt trapped, both by the island and by her own lies. Finally, after almost 3 weeks, the volcanic activity ceased and flights resumed. Jessica booked the first flight out, eager to return home and salvage what was left of her life. She rehearsed her story, trying to cover all the lies she had told. Thomas, anticipating her return, prepared for their confrontation. He ensured Ava and Mia would be staying with Emily's children for the night, sparing them the emotional fallout. He also had a bottle of wine and 2 glasses ready, creating an atmosphere of deceptive calm. When Jessica walked through the door, she looked exhausted and tense. Her deep tan was a stark contrast to the supposed business trip she had been on. Thomas greeted her with a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "Welcome back, Jessica. You look well-rested," he said, his voice dripping with irony. Jessica forced a smile. "Thanks, Thomas. It was a long trip. Why don't you sit down and have a glass of wine with me?" "We need to talk," Thomas suggested, leading her to the kitchen table. Jessica sat down, her nerves on edge. Thomas poured them both a glass of wine and took a sip, watching her closely. "Jessica, I've had a lot of time to think while you were away," Thomas began, his tone measured. "And I've come to a decision. This isn't working. Our marriage is over." Jessica's face paled. "Thomas, please, I know I have made mistakes, but we can fix this. I'll end things with Robert. I want to make it work." Thomas shook his head, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. "It's too late, Jessica. I have seen the emails, the messages, the photos. You've betrayed me and our family. I'm filing for divorce, and I have already secured custody of Ava and Mia." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Thomas, don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake, but I want to make things right." Thomas's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "Jessica, love isn't enough to fix this. Trust is broken, and I can't live like this anymore. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The papers are ready." Jessica broke down, her sobs echoing in the empty house. "What am I supposed to do? Where will I go?" Thomas felt a pang of sympathy, but knew he had to stay strong. "You all figure it out, but I need to move on, for my sake and for the girls." He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "I am staying with Emily tonight. I'll come back tomorrow to finalize the details." As he walked out of the house, Jessica's cries followed him. He felt a mixture of relief and sorrow, knowing this was the end of a chapter in his life. But he also felt hope, knowing he was moving towards a future with Emily and their blended family. Thomas drove to Emily's house, his mind racing with the events of the evening. When he arrived, she greeted him with a warm hug, sensing his need for comfort. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. "It went as expected," Thomas replied, his voice heavy. "It is over, Emily. It is finally over." Emily hugged him tightly, offering her support. "You are doing the right thing, Thomas. It will get better from here." As they sat together in the quiet of the evening, Thomas felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would be challenging, but with Emily by his side, he knew they could face anything. They had built a new life together, filled with love and hope, and he was ready to embrace whatever the future held. Chapter 7. Confrontation. Jessica paced back and forth in the living room of her now empty, rented house, trying to control the anxiety that churned in her stomach. The reality of her situation was sinking in more deeply with each passing minute. She had returned from Bali to find her world turned upside down, her marriage in shambles, and her daughters distant. The house, stripped of its familiar warmth and filled with boxes, felt like a monument to her failures. She glanced at the clock. Thomas would be arriving soon to finalize the details of their separation. The thought of facing him again, of dealing with the formalities of ending their marriage, filled her with dread. She knew she had made mistakes, but the magnitude of their consequences was overwhelming. The doorbell rang, and Jessica took a deep breath before opening the door. Thomas stood on the doorstep, his expression a mix of resolve and sadness. He stepped inside, carrying a folder filled with documents. "Jessica," he greeted her simply, his tone neutral. "Thomas," she replied, stepping aside to let him in. "Let's get this over with." They sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where they had shared countless meals and conversations over the years. Now, it was a place of cold negotiation. Thomas opened the folder and spread the papers out in front of her. "These are the divorce papers. I've gone over them with my lawyer. Rebecca assured me that everything is in order and we can move forward once you sign." Jessica glanced at the papers, her vision blurring with tears. "Do we really have to do this, Thomas? Can't we try to fix things?" Thomas shook his head, his expression firm. "It's too late, Jessica. We've tried and it didn't work. We need to move on for the sake of the girls, if nothing else." Jessica wiped away her tears and picked up the pen. Her hand trembled as she signed each document, feeling the finality of each stroke. When she was done, she pushed the papers back towards Thomas, her heart heavy. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This is for the best, Jessica." Jessica nodded, unable to find the words to respond. She felt a crushing sense of loss, knowing she had brought this upon herself. As Thomas gathered the papers, she tried to gather her thoughts. "Thomas," she said hesitantly, "I know I have hurt you and I am truly sorry. I wish things could have been different." Thomas looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and resignation. "I appreciate that, Jessica. But we can change the past. We can only move forward." With the document signed, Thomas stood up, signaling the end of their conversation. "I'll be taking the girls back to Emily's tonight. We'll arrange a time for you to see them once things settle down." Jessica nodded, feeling a pang of sadness at the mention of her daughters. "Please tell them I love them." "I will," Thomas replied, his tone softening. "Take care, Jessica." As he walked out of the house, Jessica felt a wave of despair wash over her. She sat alone in the empty kitchen, the silence oppressive. The reality of her situation was stark and unyielding, and she had no choice but to face it. Meanwhile, Thomas drove back to Emily's house, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. The finality of the divorce was both a weight lifted and a burden to bear. He pulled into the driveway and took a moment to collect his thoughts before going inside. Emily greeted him at the door, her eyes filled with concern. "How did it go?" "It's done," Thomas replied, his voice heavy. She signed the papers. Emily hugged him tightly, offering her silent support. "You did the right thing, Thomas. It will get better from here. As they settled into the evening, the kids playing in the living room, Thomas felt a sense of peace. Despite the challenges, they were building a new life together, one filled with love and hope. A few days later, Thomas received a call from Rebecca. "Thomas, we need to meet. There's been a development." Thomas felt a surge of anxiety but agreed to meet her at her office. When he arrived, Rebecca greeted him with a serious expression. "Thomas, I've come across some information that could impact the divorce settlement," she began, motioning for him to sit. "What is it?" Thomas asked, his concern growing. Rebecca took a deep breath. Jessica S.'s affair with Robert may have involved some unethical behavior at her workplace. There is evidence suggesting that Robert used his position to influence Jessica S.'s career advancement in exchange for her involvement. Thomas felt a surge of anger. "Are you saying she compromised her integrity for this affair?" Rebecca nodded. "It appears so. This information could significantly impact the financial settlement and custody arrangements. If we can prove that her actions were unethical, it could work in your favor." Thomas S.'s mind raced with the implications. What do we need to do? Rebecca outlined the steps they would take to gather more evidence and present it in court. As Thomas left her office, he felt a renewed sense of determination. Jessica S.'s actions had not only destroyed their marriage, but had also compromised her professional integrity. He would do everything in his power to protect his daughters and ensure their future was secure. As the days passed, Thomas worked closely with Rebecca to build their case. He felt a sense of purpose, knowing he was fighting for his daughter's well-being. Emily S.'s support remained unwavering, and their bond grew stronger as they faced each challenge together. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Thomas shared his thoughts with Emily. "I never imagined things would come to this, but I know we're doing the right thing." Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Thomas, you are protecting your family. That is what matters most. We'll get through this together." Their quiet resolve was a testament to the strength of their relationship. Despite the turmoil and uncertainty, they faced each day with courage and hope. The path ahead was challenging, but with each step, they moved closer to a future filled with promise and love. As the court date approached, Thomas felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He knew the fight ahead would be tough, but he was ready. With Rebecca S.'s expertise and Emily S.'s unwavering support, he felt equipped to face whatever came next. The morning of the court hearing dawned clear and bright. Thomas dressed carefully, feeling the weight of the day ahead. Emily hugged him tightly before he left, whispering words of encouragement. "You've got this, Thomas. We are all behind you." Thomas nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Emily. I'll see you after the hearing." As he entered the courtroom, Thomas felt a sense of calm determination. He took his seat beside Rebecca, who gave him a reassuring nod. Jessica and her lawyer sat across from them, her expression a mix of anxiety and defiance. The judge called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Rebecca presented their case with precision and clarity, outlining the evidence of Jessica S.'s unethical behavior. Thomas felt a mix of anger and sadness as the details of her actions were laid bare. Jessica S.'s lawyer attempted to counter their arguments, but the weight of the evidence was overwhelming. As the hearing drew to a close, the judge reviewed the information carefully before rendering his decision. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear that Mrs. Jessica Reed engaged in unethical behavior that compromised her professional integrity. This conduct has a direct impact on the custody and financial arrangements in this case. Therefore, custody of Ava and Mia will remain with Mr. Thomas Reed, and the financial settlement will be adjusted accordingly. Thomas felt a surge of relief and gratitude. The judge's decision was a victory, but it was also a sobering reminder of the consequences of Jessica S.'s actions. As the hearing concluded, he turned to Rebecca. "Thank you, Rebecca. I couldn't have done this without you." Rebecca smiled, her expression warm. "You did the right thing, Thomas. Now you can move forward." As Thomas left the courtroom, he felt a sense of closure. The fight was over, and the future stretched out before him, filled with promise. He drove home to Emily, knowing they had overcome a significant hurdle together. When he arrived, Emily greeted him with a hug. "How did it go?" "We won," Thomas said. his voice filled with relief. "The judge ruled in our favor." Emily smiled, tears of joy in her eyes. "I am so happy for you, Thomas. This is the beginning of a new chapter for all of us." As they celebrated with the kids that evening, Thomas felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had faced many challenges, but they had come out stronger. With the court battle behind them, they were free to build their future together, confident in the strength of their love and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Chapter 8. A New Beginning. Thomas woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. The soft morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. He turned to see Emily still asleep beside him, her face peaceful and relaxed. He felt a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support throughout the past few months. As he got up quietly to avoid waking her, Thomas thought about the journey they had been on. The court's ruling had granted him full custody of Ava and Mia, and the financial settlement had ensured that they were secure. Jessica's unethical behavior had been a turning point, and now he was focused on building a new life for his daughters and himself with Emily. Downstairs, the smell of freshly brewed coffee greeted him. He found Ava and Mia in the kitchen, chatting happily as they prepared breakfast. "Good morning, girls," Thomas said, smiling as he joined them. "What is on the menu today?" "Pancakes," Mia exclaimed, flipping one expertly in the pan. "Your favorite," Ava added with a grin. Thomas's heart swelled with pride and love for his daughters. Despite the upheaval, they had shown remarkable resilience and strength. He knew that Emily's presence had played a significant role in helping them adjust to their new reality. Emily soon joined them, her hair tousled from sleep, but her smile as radiant as ever. "Good morning, everyone. What a wonderful way to start the day." They sat down to breakfast, the atmosphere filled with laughter and conversation. The sense of normalcy and happiness was a testament to how far they had come. Later that day, Thomas and Emily took the kids to a nearby park. The sun was shining and the air was filled with the sounds of children playing and birds singing. They spread out a blanket on the grass and enjoyed a picnic together. As they watched the kids play, Thomas turned to Emily. "I've been thinking a lot about our future, Emily. We've come through so much, and I can't imagine my life without you and the kids." Emily's eyes sparkled with emotion. "I feel the same way, Thomas. We've built something beautiful together, and I'm excited for what's to come." Thomas took her hand, feeling a surge of love and gratitude. "I want us to keep building this life together, to face whatever challenges come our way, and to create a future filled with love and happiness." Emily leaned in and kissed him, her heart full. "I am with you, Thomas, every step of the way." As the weeks passed, they settled into a comfortable routine. Thomas and Emily worked together to create a loving and stable home for their blended family. They attended school events, supported the kids in their activities, and spent quality time together as a family. One evening, after a particularly busy day, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Thomas felt a sense of contentment wash over him. The challenges they had faced had only strengthened their bond, and he knew they were ready for whatever the future held. "Thomas, I've been thinking about something," Emily said, breaking the comfortable silence. "What is it?" Thomas asked, curious. "I think it is time we made things official," Emily said, her eyes filled with love and hope. "I want us to get married." Thomas's heart skipped a beat. He had been thinking the same thing but hadn't wanted to rush Emily. "Emily, I've been wanting to ask you the same thing. Will you marry me?" Emily's smile lit up her face. "Yes, Thomas, I will." They embraced, their hearts filled with joy and anticipation for the future. The kids were overjoyed when they shared the news, and they all began planning the wedding together. The wedding was a beautiful, intimate affair held in the garden of their new home. Surrounded by close friends and family, Thomas and Emily exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through all of life's challenges. The kids played an essential role in the ceremony, symbolizing the unity of their blended family. As they stood together, hand in hand, Thomas felt a profound sense of fulfillment. They had faced immense challenges, but they had come out stronger, their love and commitment to each other unwavering. The reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. Thomas looked around at the people who had supported them, feeling grateful for the community that had helped them through their darkest times. Later that evening, as the festivities wound down, Thomas and Emily took a moment to themselves. They stood under the stars, the night air cool and refreshing. "We did it, Emily," Thomas said, his voice filled with emotion. "We've come so far." Emily squeezed his hand. "Yes, we have, and I am so excited for our future together." As they embraced, Thomas felt a deep sense of peace. They had built a new beginning, one filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. The journey had been challenging, but it had led them to a place of profound happiness and fulfillment. Over the next few months, Thomas and Emily continued to build their life together. They focused on creating a loving and supportive environment for the kids, ensuring they had the stability and care they needed to thrive. Their home was filled with joy, laughter, and the occasional challenge, but they faced everything together, united in their love and commitment. One sunny Saturday, they decided to take a family trip to the beach. The kids were thrilled, and the excitement was palpable as they packed their bags and loaded the car. As they arrived at the beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore and the smell of the salty sea air filled their senses. They set up a spot on the sand, spreading out blankets and setting up an umbrella for shade. The day was filled with fun and relaxation. The kids built sandcastles, played in the water, and collected seashells. Thomas and Emily watched them with smiles, their hearts full. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the water, Thomas took Emily's hand and led her for a walk along the shore. "Emily, I've never been happier than I am right now," Thomas said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You've brought so much love and joy into my life." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "Thomas, you've done the same for me. We've built something incredible together." They walked in comfortable silence, the sound of the waves and the warmth of their love surrounding them. As they turned back towards their spot on the beach, they saw the kids gathered around a bonfire, roasting marshmallows and laughing. Thomas felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had created. Despite the challenges and heartbreak they had faced, they had come out stronger, their love and commitment unwavering. As they joined the kids around the bonfire, Thomas couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. It had been filled with ups and downs, but every step had led them to this moment of profound happiness and fulfillment. Later that night, as they drove home, the kids asleep in the back seat, Thomas and Emily shared a quiet moment of reflection. "Emily, I am so grateful for everything we've built together," Thomas said, his voice filled with emotion. "I can wait to see what the future holds for us." Emily squeezed his hand, her heart full. "Me too, Thomas. Whatever comes our way, I know we'll face it together." As they pulled into the driveway of their home, Thomas felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over him. They had come through the storm and found their way to a place of love, hope, and endless possibilities. The future was bright, and he knew that together they could face anything. Their new beginning was just the start of a beautiful journey, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a lifetime of happiness together. Chapter 9. Redemption and Revenge. Jessica sat in her small, dimly lit apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, a shadow of the confident, successful person she had once been. The past months had been a whirlwind of regret and introspection. She had lost everything: her marriage, her family, her home, and even her dignity. Her relationship with Robert had disintegrated soon after the court hearing. His support had waned as the scandal surrounding their affair grew, and he eventually distanced himself completely. Jessica found herself alone, struggling to make ends meet and rebuild her life from the ground up. Determined to earn back her daughter's trust, Jessica decided to focus on self-improvement. She enrolled in therapy, aiming to understand and address the root causes of her actions. It was a humbling experience, forcing her to confront the depths of her mistakes and the pain she had caused those she loved. Jessica also sought to repair her professional reputation. She found a new job, far removed from the industry where her scandal had erupted. The work was challenging and less glamorous, but it provided her with a sense of purpose and a chance to prove herself anew. One Saturday morning, Jessica received a call from Ava. Her heart leaped at the sound of her daughter's voice, though Ava's tone was guarded. "Hi, Mom. Can we meet for breakfast tomorrow?" Ava asked. "Of course, sweetheart," Jessica replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'd love to see you." They agreed on a time and place, and Jessica spent the rest of the day preparing for their meeting. She was nervous, knowing how much was riding on this reunion. She desperately wanted to reconnect with her daughters and show them that she was committed to making amends. The next morning, Jessica arrived at the cafe early, her hands trembling slightly as she waited. Ava and Mia walked in together, and Jessica's heart swelled with emotion at the sight of them. They had grown so much in the past months, and she felt a pang of guilt for not being there. "Hi, girls," Jessica greeted them, her voice soft. "Thank you for coming." Ava nodded, her expression cautious. "We wanted to talk to you, Mom." They sat down and Jessica listened as her daughters expressed their feelings. Ava spoke about the hurt and betrayal they had felt, while Mia shared her fears and confusion. Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she apologized, acknowledging their pain and promising to do better. "I know I've made terrible mistakes," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "I can change the past, but I'm committed to being a better mother and person. I want to earn back your trust." Ava and Mia exchanged glances before nodding slowly. "We were willing to give you a chance, Mom," Ava said, "but it will take time." Jessica smiled through her tears, feeling a glimmer of hope. "Thank you, girls. That is all I can ask for." Meanwhile, Thomas and Emily continued to build their life together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They faced the challenges of blending their families with patience and love, creating a nurturing environment for all the children. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Thomas received a call from his lawyer, Rebecca. "Thomas, I have some interesting news regarding Robert," Rebecca said, her tone serious. "It seems he's been involved in some questionable activities at his company, and there's an ongoing investigation." Thomas felt a surge of interest. "What kind of activities?" "Embezzlement, among other things," Rebecca replied. "If the allegations are true, he could be facing serious legal consequences." Thomas thanked her for the information and hung up, his mind racing. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for to see Robert face the consequences of his actions. Over the next few weeks, Thomas kept a close eye on the developments. The investigation into Robert's activities gained traction, and the evidence against him mounted. It wasn't too long before Robert was arrested and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and other financial crimes. Thomas felt a sense of satisfaction as he watched the news coverage of Robert's downfall. Justice was being served, and it was a vindication of sorts for everything Jessica and Robert had put him through. But Thomas's thoughts soon turned to Jessica. Despite everything, he didn't want her to suffer needlessly. He decided to reach out to her, hoping they could find some common ground for the sake of their daughters. He arranged a meeting with Jessica at a quiet park. When she arrived, she looked wary but hopeful. They sat down on a bench, the sounds of children playing in the background. "Jessica, I wanted to talk to you about Robert," Thomas began. "He's facing serious legal trouble. I thought you should know." Jessica's eyes widened in shock. "I had no idea. Thank you for telling me, Thomas." They talked for a while, discussing their shared concerns for Ava and Mia. Thomas could see the changes in Jessica, the humility, the determination to do better. It gave him hope that they could find a way to co-parent effectively. "I want to be a part of the girls' lives," Jessica said earnestly. "I know I have a lot to make up for, but I am committed to doing whatever it takes." Thomas nodded. "I believe you, Jessica. Let us work together to support our daughters. They deserve to see us getting along." As they stood up to leave, Jessica felt a sense of gratitude. It wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to rebuild her relationship with her daughters and create a positive co-parenting dynamic with Thomas. Back at home, Thomas shared the news with Emily. She listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "I think it's a good step, Thomas," Emily said. "The girls need both of you in their lives, And it's important to show them that you can work together. Thomas nodded, feeling a sense of resolve. You are right, Emily. It is about what's best for them. As the months passed, Jessica worked hard to prove herself to her daughters. She attended their school events, supported them in their activities, and made an effort to be present in their lives. Slowly but surely, Ava and Mia began to trust her again, their relationship healing bit by bit. Thomas and Emily continued to nurture their blended family, providing a loving and stable home for all the children. They faced challenges, but their love and commitment to each other saw them through. One sunny afternoon, as they all gathered for a barbecue in the backyard, Thomas felt a deep sense of contentment. The kids were playing happily, and the air was filled with laughter and the delicious smell of grilled food. Jessica arrived, joining them with a smile. She had brought a homemade dessert, a gesture that was met with appreciation. As they all sat down to eat, the atmosphere was warm and friendly. Thomas looked around at his family, Emily by his side, the kids laughing and chatting, and Jessica making an effort to be a part of their lives. It hadn't been an easy journey, but they had come through it stronger and more united. Later that evening, as the sun set and the kids played a game of tag in the yard, Thomas and Emily sat together, watching the scene with contentment. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Thomas said, his voice filled with emotion. "Yes, we have," Emily replied, her eyes shining with love. "And I wouldn't change a thing." As they sat there, hand in hand, Thomas felt a deep sense of peace. They had faced the storms of betrayal and heartache, but they had emerged into a place of love and hope. The future was bright, and he knew that together they could face anything. Their journey was a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and resilience. No matter what challenges lay ahead, Thomas and Emily knew they had built a foundation that could weather any storm. And with their blended family by their side, they looked forward to a future filled with endless possibilities and joy.